episode 90 of Below the Belt, joined today by boxing scribe Paul Zanon. It's episode 90. It's the Andy Holligan episode. For those of you that at home that don't know who Andy Holligan is, I don't even know who Andy Holligan is. So he was the guy that Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. fought in his 90th fight. And he won by a 5th round stoppage. So I like to push out these little factoids every now and again. You know, we get to episode 90, Paul, and there's only so many fighters really of the modern kind of age that had that many fights. You know, even Ali probably had 65, something like that.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, you're going to have to, when you start going over the ton, you're going to be into the sort of 50s and 60s. I mean, the likes of Sugar Ray Robinson, we had sort of 200 plus fights, and those sort of guys. Chavez Senior, he's good for over 100. Roberto Duran, good for over 100. But otherwise, yeah, modern day greats. You're not going to get much change out of sort of 60 fights. Most of them, in fact, probably under that. You know.
I suppose what I could have done is I could have spoke about some of the journeymen that we've had, some of the great journeymen that we've had that have racked up hundreds of fights. Guys like Johnny Greaves that have boxed, 100 fights and not got and come out with all their faculties. Yeah,
no, he's. You know what? He would be a great one when we do podcast number 100. Let's get Johnny on. I've got his details. He is a phenomenal character. Honestly, so funny, and the stories he's got. I remember him sort of telling me once his story about how I think he was fighting someone, and it was for like the bronze masters belt or something, and he clipped the guy, and he was sort of like thinking, oh shit, I've hurt him, so he's gone right over and like hugged him and sort of pinned him up against the rope so he wouldn't fall. He's thinking, please don't go. So as a journeyman, obviously, what you're trying to do is you want to fight as regularly as possible. If you start spanking people, then you're never going to get the work. But I mean, Johnny was a very talented fighter, and he's a phenomenal character, a lovely man, and he's got so many stories. I think he'd be a fantastic person to get on for the ton.
I think that's a great idea. If we could set that up, that'd be brilliant, Paul. That'd be I think that'd be a brilliant podcast, because I saw the documentary he did, and we've mentioned it on this podcast before. It was on BT Sport, I believe, that they put it together, and he'd be great because that was a really, really good documentary. But a pretty packed weekend of boxing. We had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is rare, and all pretty decent cards as well. So I think it makes sense, Paul, to go in kind of chronological order, if you like, and we'll start with Friday. And it was, I would say, your man Billy Joe, but it's also your man Martin Murray as well. It's both of you. It's both of your guys, really. And I messaged you and I said, do you fancy writing the epilogue for Martin Murray's book? How did you? What was your kind of the card overall? How do you think it was? I think it was a pretty decent card overall.
Yeah, I thought Dante Dixon was very impressive. The guy he fought against, I can't remember his name though. It's Italian Stallion from Wales.
Angelo Dragone.
Yes, Angelo Dragone. There we go. He really, really guts. He suffered a broken jaw from the fight.
Wow.
Yeah, suffered a broken jaw. But great. Great respect for each other, admiration. Dragone went in there and gave it absolutely everything. Caught him a few times, but Dixon was computing the information every few seconds. And when he was getting caught with a punch, he wasn't getting caught with it full again. He was making those little adjustments. So very impressed with the boxing brain. There was a few little things you could see in there, like I was seeing the way he was sort of working off the ropes, the lean backs, and then coming off at different angles. It was Billy Joe Saunders written all over it. So you could see that his mentor, his manager, whichever guys Billy Joe Saunders taking there, a lot of it had rubbed off. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that guy. I think Dixon's got a lot to offer at 126, and I think he's a genuine prospect. Seems like a nice kid. In terms of Shannon Courtney, so I thought she'd done extremely well for a number of reasons. Firstly, the girl she was in against, forget the fact that she wasn't exactly sort of, Clarissa Shields, but it was more a case of she over at Shannon. Bigger girl. Shannon shrunk down to bantamweight. I thought looked fantastic at the weight. Looked very fresh. But instead of sort of taking a gulp and thinking, oh shit, it's Rachel Ball all over again here. She put her hands up, had a look through the guard, worked out the counters, and within a few rounds, she completely, bearing in mind she was on the back foot, all of a sudden it was a massive role reversal. And the knockout, I mean, it was like right through the ropes, face down. I thought, bloody hell. So Shannon's got good power. I think she's got very good power at that weight. She will make a much bigger dent than she would in the higher weights. And I think she should be very proud of that, mentally and physically and competitively. She's made a great comeback. And I wish her all the very best moving forward. She's a nice girl. And she's good for British boxing. I think good for boxing over. And if memory serves me, I think she just signed a contract to be one of her Everlast's models as well. So it's all going good for her now, you know.
She got an Adidas deal as well, didn't she, Shannon?
Was it Adidas? Oh, that's that. Yeah. She got, maybe it's Adidas I'm getting it confused with.
Yeah.
It's Adidas actually, yeah, which is in current settings, dare I say, better than Everlast. If that comment had been said 30 years ago, I'd have probably been shot. So, yeah, I wish her the very best. And you know, good looking girl, very good fighter. I think she's got a lot more to give, and she's working through her own career gears at the moment. So, yeah, I thought the card preceding the big event was very good.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good overall. And then James Tennyson obviously won in a round as well. It was an eliminator for the WBA, not a final eliminator. I know a lot of people get confused by that. So it's just kind of eliminated for the world title, so we'll just boost him up the WBA rankings at 135 pounds against Josh Riley, who was ranked by the WBA. I think he was 10 or 11 for the WBA. I think he was 9 actually with the WBA. And James Tennyson wipes him out in a round. Was you impressed with Tennyson?
Yeah, I mean, he beat Gervonta Davis in under 30 seconds.
For those of you that aren't aware, Johnny Nelson said after the fight that he thinks that James Tennyson would beat Gervonta Tank Davis, who's, you know, one of the pound for pound best in the sport. Oh, Johnny. Bless him.
On a serious note, Tennyson could beat Anthony Joshua in 3 rounds. So, I mean, back to serious. I think Tennyson done very well. I think if Johnny Nelson hadn't made such a silly comment, which, to be honest, I've got a lot of time for Johnny. He always speaks a hell of a lot of sense. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was cold in the studio or something, or something. He had a bit of something happened on his circuit that made him say that. But it was a silly comment because, I mean, Christ, Tank at the moment is on fire, especially after Leo Santa Cruz. But let's get back to the man, Tennyson. He is a very destructive fighter. I'd like to see him use his skills a bit more. You can't really tell much from a fight like this apart from the fact that he hits bloody hard. And if anyone receives that punch, and he, you know, dare I say, referring back to what Johnny Nelson says, if he was to hit Tank Davis with that shot, he'd probably knock him down as well. But the problem is that when you start going up in those leagues, you need to have that boxing brain, those boxing skills to be able to creep in to then unleash that shot. So it's a case of Tennyson now moving through the gears a little bit more, stepping up in class, etc. But can't take anything away from the lad. You know, nice guy, and like I said, absolutely dynamite power in his fists. And I look forward to his next fight. You know, which won't be against Tank Davis, just for the record, but certainly whoever he's up against, they're going to be very tentative to want to lower their guard at any point. That's for sure.
That's the thing now. He was at Super Feather. He obviously he lost at Super Feather, and then, you know, because he had a world title shot there at Super Featherweight, and he's gone up to 135 because by all accounts he was killing himself making the weight to make Super Feather. So it kind of makes sense for him to do that. But he's gone up to 135, which is. Well, lightweight is an absolute murderer's row. It's, you know, you've got Teofimo Lopez, who's got all the titles. You've got Gervonta Davis, who's got a secondary title. You've got Devin Haney, who's got a secondary title. His best shot is going, just looking at the rankings here, he's going for a WBA gold belt. Who Ivan Mendy, our old friend Ivan Mendy's got that. So it's, you know, he's lost to Tevin Farmer. He did okay in the fight, but he was kind of outclassed in the end. He's in a tough division, and I think for him, I think the best we can hope for Tennyson is really to either win one of these secondary belts or to just have really fun fights and make loads of money.
I think a good sort of move forward for him would be to fight against Lee Selby, because Lee Selby, you know, he did well against Gambos, and I think, you know, that's a fight which the likes of Haney went 12 rounds with, and Gervonta, I think, knocked him out the 11th or something. You know, so Lee did well against him, and I think a fight against Lee. I'm not sure how many more fights Lee wants to have, but he's not having to kill himself for 135. You know, he's sort of skipped 2 sort of weight divisions in there, and it'd be a good scalp for Tennyson should he beat him. So, and I think it'll be a sort of fight that Lee would relish as well, because he loves going in against hard hitters. He's a very wily fighter, and he's got beautiful foot movement. He's got lovely hands to go with it. That could be you know, a nice test for Tennyson, just in terms of going in with someone with a higher skill level. You know,
I think that's a good shout. You know, I think, you know, even though Selby lost to Kambosos last time out, I think he lost comfortably, but it's, you know, it was at world level, and there was no kind of shame in it. He didn't disgrace himself in any way. He just lost to the better man on the night, you know, and that's absolutely fine. So Tennyson, yeah, it'd be a good kind of marking fight for Tennyson, because someone a bit cute, a bit slick, kind of like Tevin Farmer, and you can kind of see his levels. Then you can kind of gauge where he's at with Tennyson now, really. So it was interesting to see where he would go. And but onto the main event. I think, is it safe to say that this was 2 middleweights fighting for a version of the super middleweight title?
Yeah, I mean, bit Martin Murray has campaigned most of his career at middleweight, and Billy Joe, yeah, I mean, with the exception of his last few fights, he's been middle as well. But for Billy Joe, you know, he admitted himself a few months back he was 16.5 stone. So shedding an extra 8 pounds from super middle to the middleweight sort of part sounds easy enough. But I think they certainly appreciate being able to come in the extra sort of 8 pounds up. Good fight in terms of the matchmaking. I'm going to obviously, you know, be a bit biased. A good friend of Martin Murray, and had the extreme pleasure of writing his book, which my mate was telling me that Steve Bunce was referring to on a few occasions, in terms of like the life that Martin Murray's had, and you can read his book in his prison sentence, etc. But you got to look at the facts there. Martin's 38. The fight would have been more competitive a couple of years ago, certainly, but Martin also proved something. He's as tough as hell. There were some great counters he was catching Billy Joe with around sort of the solar plexus area, but it just seemed that Billy Joe was about a second ahead every time. He had, you know, beautiful footwork, and Billy Joe was saying this is not a fully polished version of him. And I think I said it in the last podcast, and I've mentioned it on many podcasts before. Billy Joe, on his day, with a good training camp and his head screwed in the right direction, will beat Canelo, will beat Golovkin. And I've said that for a long time. So I wish, I'm not sure what Martin will do from here on. Maybe he still wants to fight a few more, and, you know, he can get himself a few fights and himself a few quid. Main thing is that as long as he's healthy, and you know, and that's it. But as far as Billy Joe goes, his clock is ticking.
Yes.
The Golovkin, the Canelo fight was supposed to happen in May. It wasn't for coronavirus, but instead he's now got to watch Callum Smith versus Canelo instead, and he's thinking that should have been me for, like, you know, a much bigger sum of money. So I genuinely hope Billy Joe's going to get to fight Canelo. Fighting Golovkin now, well, that would be funny, wouldn't really have the buzz anymore, because Golovkin's 63 years old, so
yeah,
it's a little bit over the hill. But against Canelo, that's a big fight. And as I've always maintained, Billy Joe on his day, with that footwork, at that height, that weight, etc., I think that he will drive Canelo up the wall.
Yeah, I was quite impressed with Saunders. I actually thought he boxed quite well. I thought he boxed quite well again on Friday. Sorry, I thought nearly said Saturday. And yes, he was, like you said, he was a second head of Martin Murray. Martin Murray is perhaps not the boxer he was, but he didn't. I felt like if the stoppage would have come for Saunders, I think he would have taken the opportunity to get it. He was aggressive, is the point I'm making, is that I thought he was quite spiteful. He was quite aggressive. I think he buzzed Murray. I think it might have been round 5. I think he might have buzzed him. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't, you know, you had the usual people online, Dan Raphael for one, who was kind of slagging Billy Joe Saunders off. But I actually don't think Saunders could have done much more, really. I actually thought he was pretty aggressive. He came to win. I think if the stoppage would have presented itself, he would have taken the stoppage. I don't think he would have took his foot off the gas. My worry is now with Canelo fighting Callum Smith, and then he won't box again until May. You'd think if should Canelo win, if he doesn't win, there's going to be a rematch. You would suspect, but you would think Canelo would box again in May. Saunders then is again on the outside looking in, and the WBO, from what I heard on Friday, they're going to call their mandatory for Saunders' belt, and I think they're kind of right to, really, because he's had 2 gimmies in a gut. Not that Murray's a gimme, but he's had 2 voluntaries in a row now. And I think they're right to say, right, come on, you got to fight someone. You got to fight someone, one of our challengers now. So I think Zach Parker's up there. He was supposed to box on the undercard and didn't. There was his cut man got COVID. Or his opponent's cut man got COVID. So got Zach Parker there. There's also Demetrius Andrade. If he decides to move up to super middle, then he can get a shot at Billy Joe Saunders. I think it's going to be one of those 2 next for Billy Joe, really, which I don't think Andrade or Zach Parker does him any favours, does it?
Andrade was calling him out. That would be a boring old fight. He's got a way of draining the energy out of fights. One of the other people that's on the scene at super middle, which a lot of people thought beat Callum Smith last time, is John Ryder, and obviously Billy Joe fought him early on in his career. One of the fights that's still out there that would make a shitload of money, and everyone would love to see it. It's like the bitter rivalry is Billy Joe against Chris Eubank Jr. What you were saying before about 2 middleweights fighting. I mean, Billy Joe sort of bounced around his weight, but he does make middleweight. Chris Eubank Jr. walks at around at about 12 stone 2 and can pretty much go to the loo and do a number 1 and a number 2 and bang, he's on middleweight, and he's always good to go. And I think that both fighters have progressed very nicely. I would say that Billy Joe has probably developed more as the fighter. His skills have got sharpened. His toolkit seems to be more fruitful. Eubank Jr. just seems to have shown that he's as tough as hell. And he's always going to be a tough one to knock out because he can really take a punch. But the other thing about Chris Eubank Jr. is he is very unforgiving if you haven't come in with ultimate fitness, because he will swarm you from beginning to end. So I think after having fought Groves and DeGale and a few others in there, Yildirim, as part of the World Boxing Super Series, I think he's got a nice little CV to say, listen, Billy Joe, let's do it. It'll all come down to money, though. He's a very prudent businessman, and if Billy Joe gets the right offer, he'll go in with him. So that could maybe be the fight that happens if Canelo doesn't happen,
Yeah, and that was, and believe it or not, that was 6 years ago, their last fight. It doesn't seem like that long, and Eubank really is. I think a lot of the time, I think because he's a junior, you almost look at him like he's a baby, like he's a novice still. But that was 6 years ago, and that was probably his first real coming out fight, even though he lost it. And the thing for me for Eubank Jr. is he beat Matt Korobov off a shoulder injury in the second round. That was last December, so that was a year ago, and he hasn't boxed since. And that's the thing with Junior, really. He beat James DeGale, and James DeGale had obviously seen better days, but it was a good win. It was a comfortable win. I think he scored a couple of knockdowns. He scored one quite late. He nearly got the stoppage, and it was such a good win to take him on to the next level, where he could perhaps get a shot at a proper super middleweight title, another shot at another super middleweight title. And then he signed with Al Heyman and PBC, and fair play to him for doing that, because he'll make plenty of money doing it. He wants to crack America. He's got Matt Korobov, great, good fight. Matt Korobov, that's a good fight. And then he's just sat on the shelf ever since. He's sat there for a year now, and obviously COVID's a big factor in that. But PBC have been putting on cards, and I'd like to have seen Eubank out this year, really. And it looks like he's not going to be out this year, which is a real shame. So yeah, I'd love to see him and Billy Joe Saunders do it again, because the rivalry, it writes itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing, just want to sort of point out, I'm not saying Billy Joe against Canelo as if Canelo's going to beat Smith. I would absolutely love to see Smith beat Canelo, and then in terms of, say, if Billy Joe Saunders fights Smith, a great domestic dust-up, a totally different fight to what Canelo would be. Firstly, a difference between Canelo and Smith of about 7 inches in height, and the range difference in terms of the jab, the movement around the ring, etc. That would make I don't think Billy Joe's been in with someone of that sort of height and maybe the same sort of power. I mean, he's been in with some sort of hard hitters, but again, it make Billy Joe have to sort of adjust. But it's one thing he's shown is that he's very, very versatile, and his footwork is absolutely sensational. The best version of Billy Joe at the right weight with a good training camp is very, very difficult to beat. And even Jamie Moore put a comment on Twitter, I think it might have been today, basically saying, well done to his man Martin in terms of what he did, but also complimenting Billy Joe on how he operated on the fight,
Yeah, no, Saunders gives everybody a good fight. It's just my worry with him against Canelo. I think the physicality might be just too much for him. Plus, Canelo is just he has improved massively over the last 3 or 4 years. He really has. His feet are mud. He's walking in mud. They're not very quick, but his upper body movement is exceptional. His power's there. Every punch is with spite. He wants to hurt you with every shot he throws. He paces rounds really well. Like, for me, Canelo is the best fighter in the sport. I think it would take a special performance from Saunders to beat him, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think stylistically he's a tougher fight than Callum Smith is for Canelo. But Callum Smith's
I think speed and skill beats Canelo. Using a very vintage blueprint from Floyd Mayweather. But it did show that, adding that element of frustration in there when you have that level of skill is very, very difficult to overcome. And one thing that Billy Joe can do is infuriate a fighter in front of him. And I think, like I said, if he's on his absolute A game and he's constantly moving around, he'd never be trying to knock out Canelo. Canelo's got one of those sort of like pyramid sort of shaped necks. They sort of just it starts at the shoulders and finishes off at his head. It's like wide at his shoulders and finishes off in it like a triangle form. But he's a very, very, very astute fighter. He's very clever with his little lean backs, likes to set the traps, but so does Billy Joe. But Billy Joe sometimes sets half steps into a trap to then get them to walk back into his trap and then does his 2-3 punch combos and moves off. He's got like 3 or 4 different game plans up his sleeve. Very, very good. So, yeah, that would be a very interesting chess match to an extent,
Yeah, I think it's a cracking fight, and then obviously we've got Canelo, Callum Smith in a couple of weeks, and I imagine we'll do a podcast around that as well. Let's move on to Saturday now. The undercard. Let's be honest, it wasn't up to much really. The undercard. So I, if you don't mind, I'm just going to pretty much skip over it. But it was all about the main event, and it was Commonwealth champion Lyndon Arthur against Anthony Yarde. Lyndon Arthur won by split decision, scores of 115-114 twice and a 117-111 to Yarde. How did you score the fight, Paul?
Yeah, I had it 115-114 actually to Lyndon.
Is that an even round you had in there, Paul?
Yeah, well,
Shame
I don't know.
on.
Somewhere, but I'm smiling because the 117-111 was Ian John Lewis. He's done it again. He's going to have there's going to be a top 1,000 bloopers from him soon. And I love the guy. I think as a character he's fantastic. He's a lovely, lovely man. But sometimes you just kind of wondering what he's looking at. But I would describe, or if I was summing up that fight, it was about 2 punches: the jab from Arthur and the right hand from Yarde. From the get-go, Arthur did extremely well to just literally stand behind the jab, use his range, use that height, and stand fairly upright, making Yarde use all that extra energy to fire up. And for the first 4 or 5 rounds, Yarde just seemed a little bit out of range, and then he started to get his punches together. Towards the end, I mean, Christ, the fight almost finished in the last sort of 20, 25 seconds when Anthony Yarde landed that right hand. It was... Arthur was holding on for sort of dear life at that point, but you've got to give him. I mean, it was a very, very basic strategy, but ping his head off, lean back, use your distance, use your height, and that was it. And it worked. I mean, would a rematch be more explosive? I mean, I don't know. This is the thing. Everyone thinks Anthony Yarde, knockout artist. He is. Once he does his setup with his other punches and then he throws the right, he's got a hell of a lot of power, but he's not a come forward fighter. He's very, very tactically sort of minded, and he likes setting the traps. He likes people. At one point, he was even goading Arthur to come in so that he could then sort of throw in the counters. But if he has a rematch with Arthur, he's going to have to go for him. He's just going to have to try and run him over in the first few rounds. And then when Arthur tries to counter him, then he counters the counters, and that's it. So again, tough one because COVID, lot to do with it. It is a lot of people being inactive. It's hard to know what they've actually been doing during that time. But I think, listen, Lyndon Arthur did extremely well. Should be very, very proud of that performance. Forget about who's been training, who hasn't, COVID, no COVID, etc. I thought the game plan worked very well, and if there's a possibility for a rematch, I'd certainly want to watch it. But he deserved it in my eyes, definitely.
Yeah, I scored it a draw. I had it 114 apiece. I don't do even rounds. I'm not a believer in them. I'll score it to somebody. I don't care who the fuck. I am fucking scoring for somebody. I don't care. I will find a fucking winner. I think it's just a stubborn thing in me. And I've read somewhere as well that I think it's more American judges. They're really dissuaded from scoring even rounds. It's something they really don't do. But British judges do it. And I can see why. But for me, no. I am fucking scoring a round for somebody. But I had it a draw. A lot of people had it quite wide for Arthur, which I understand. He did dominate at times with his jab, but I felt the middle rounds Yard started to close the gap, and he started to force the pace a little bit more, and then the championship rounds particularly really started to put it on Arthur a bit. One thing that came out of it was that Lyndon Arthur actually hurt his hand in the warm up. He hurt his hand his right hand in the warm up. And there was some talk during the fight. The commentators kind of picked up that he wasn't using the right hand. And I clocked that as well, because I was, again, tweeting from below the belt, and I said he needs to start bringing that right hand into play to start pinging some 1-2s at Yard. But it turns out he'd hurt his hand, and that's why he wasn't using it. But in the back end of the fight, when Yard was starting to put it on him, Arthur started to let that right hand go because he was trying to get Yard's respect. And he landed it quite a few times. Yard doesn't have the best defense. The shoulder roll, Floyd uses it amazing. James Toney used it really well. It's not the shoulder roll. It's not something you use at range. It's not something for range. It's to close space, isn't it? Without clipping shots and working on the inside. You can't try and jab at range using a shoulder roll. It doesn't really work. I think, we all know that his trainer Tunde has, worked in the Mayweather gym, and I think he's a bit of a fanboy for Mayweather, really, which I understand. But I think, does Anthony Yard need a new trainer, Paul? I'm
not sure. I'm not sure about that. To be honest, everyone started saying sort of shoot Tunde after Kovalev because I think that what was it?
The tank. He told him to empty the tank.
And a lot of people are sort of shooting him for that. But in the same breath, when he did empty the tank, he almost knocked out Kovalev. So he would have then become Sports Personality of the Year at that point. So the other thing about Arthur was this: is that his jab, it wasn't, apart from the fact it was connecting. I think one of the reasons why it was connecting is how deceptive it was. He holds his left lead by his waist, and it's a bit tough to know, because on a few occasions what he'd do is he did like 3 jabs, and then he threw a jab off the sort of hook off the jab, and sometimes he then just threw a sort of leading hook off the front hand, and that's it. But it was always coming up from the waist, so when you're whipping it up from there, it's a bit hard to know where it's going to go. And whereas if your hands up by your chin like Marvin Hagler, there's usually a little signal of something to sort of say, whether it be the foot moves or I don't know, whatever it may be. There's usually a little sort of tiny signal in there. When it's coming from the waist, it's really, really tough to know because your peripheral vision doesn't catch it maybe as well, So, but yeah, in terms of new trainer, I don't know. Him and Tunde seem to work well. I don't think it was an awful performance from Yard. I think if Yard had got sparked out, or there was like about 5 or 6 occasions in the fight where it looked like he was going to get knocked down or knocked out, and there wasn't any adjustments, then there would have been a case of that. But when we got to about sort of round 4, Tunde was starting to say, right, we need to do this, that, and the other. Let your hands go, etc. And I'm going to say stick with Tunde for the moment, and it seems to be working well for them. I don't think he needs that sort of cultural shift in his career at this point.
I think it's about trust, isn't it? And he completely trusts him. Yard completely trusts Tunde. And, Frank Warren or somebody could get in his ear and say, you've got to leave him, you've got to go somewhere else. But if he's not going to have that same relationship that he does with Tunde, then it's not going to work, is it? And I think perhaps, he's very marketable, Yard. He's got, again, he's an Adidas athlete as well. He's got massive following. The people in the States love him. But I think perhaps there's too much pressure on him, and perhaps the expectations are a little bit too high. Because other than, I think it was the 8th round against Kovalev, he was dominated in that fight. And I think perhaps it's just he's kind of found his level. Perhaps he's not a world level fighter, and that's okay. And that's fine. It's not the end of the world if he's not a world class fighter. Am I being harsh?
No, not at all. I mean, the only way he's going to find out if he's world class is if he beats Callum Johnson, who hasn't fought in. I think his last fight was 1981, and
it's outrageous he can't get a fight, Callum Johnson.
I know, he's a feared man. I mean, when he fought against Beterbiev, I interviewed Beterbiev earlier this year. Funny enough, it seems like a million years ago, but it was actually earlier this year. And I was asking him about the British fighters, and he's not much into watching boxing after Beterbiev. And he said to me, don't really know much about Anthony Yarde. He said that I'd watched the Kovalev fight, so that's it. He said Joshua Buatsi, he said, seems good, but again, I don't know a lot about him. He said Callum Johnson, he said, very strong fighter. He said, I would fight him again, definitely. So that's, coming from Beterbiev, who is, 15 fights, 15 knockouts, hard as hell. So that's a great representation. I think if Yard wants to kind of, regain his stripes, either goes for Arthur again, which he can potentially win if he jumps on him early. But also, the Buatsi Yard fight, I think at some point it's got to happen. And but Buatsi again is one of those ones that was sort of, you lump into the likes of the Daniel Dubois, the Anthony Yards, etc., who were all sort of world title contenders. And Buatsi now, as the unbeaten fighter, has kind of got to move forward and see how far he can get. So I think those two have got to lock horns at some point.
175 domestically is actually pretty good. I think Yard is going to fight Arthur again. They both said afterwards, I'll have the rematch. I think Arthur's going to struggle to make the same money against many other people than he will against Anthony Yarde. You've got Ricards Bolotniks, who won the Golden Contract in the week. He beat Serge Michel in the final in the week. Harlan Eubank was on that card as well. It was actually a pretty decent card. And he beat Jose Burton, who's a pretty decent operator at 175 as well. So there is options out there for both of them. But I think the rematch is going to be next. I think it makes sense for Yard. It makes sense for Yard because he wants to right the wrong in his mind. And then it makes sense for Arthur because I think he's going to think, well, if I beat him again, I've made plenty of money. I'll make another good purse, and that's the end of the Yard thing. So I think it makes sense. I think they'll fight again. I think they'll fight in front of a crowd because Warren's missing the crowds. He's missing he is missing the crowds and he's right. It adds another element to the fights. It really, really does. I imagine being a fighter in the ring and you land a cuffing shot and you hear that roar go up, and the other guy hears the roar go up and he thinks, well, that didn't hurt me, but it's almost like it did. So it's just something different being we're fighting in front of a crowd. So I think the rematch is going to happen. I think that's going to happen next. And
it's a sensible move forward. And if anything as well with Arthur, he's now in that mix in terms of other people. Say the likes of Callum Johnson, if he's looking for a fight where he can prove himself at domestic level, and whether it's a case of he's maybe subconsciously thinking I can springboard myself back up to world level again, Arthur would be a great way. I can regain a title. I've got something to bring to the table. I've got bargaining chips to bring to the table at maybe domestic and European level, and that's it. So like you said, it's a very hot division at the moment, 175. I'd still like to see Yard against Buatsi. Be interested to see how that sort of pans out. I think I've said it a while back that I thought that Buatsi will become world champion. I probably said that from about the third or fourth fight, but in his last fight, he showed how he was able to adjust after he received an eye injury and basically still came back and won the fight. So how he sort of deals with Yard, if Yard's able to clip him on the whiskers, well, we'll have to see. But I think that'll be a good fight. But yeah, you're right. Yard and Arthur need to lock horns again and keep the fans treated like you said at the very beginning. We've been treated to a Friday, Saturday, and sort of Sunday night sort of weekend bender of boxing. Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. In these sort of pandemic times, boxing has been very, very fruitful for all the fans, and for that we're grateful.
You're absolutely right. Let's move on to Saturday night, Sunday morning now. So first question, what's your routine for the late night US fights? Are you a stay up and watch it? Do you stay up all the way through? Do you have a little nap, or do you watch it first thing in the morning? What's your thing?
So if it's a Vegas fight, then it's duvet on the sofa, set the alarm. Sometimes set 2 alarms so I don't give it the old hit the snooze button and that's it. But if it's an MSG fight and it's live at around say 2 o'clock, I usually sort of stay up. I'll sort of watch whatever. Sometimes, especially if there's other fights that finish around sort of 11:30 midnight, and then just stay up and maybe watch a bit of a movie or whatever really. But if it's a Vegas fight where that they're going to be fighting anywhere between sort of 4 and 5, then getting those 3 or 4 hours kipping are certainly beneficial, So but with Texas, was it sort of 6-7 hours difference? I just set the alarm and then woke up and that was it,
I'm the same. I'm a fan of the nap. I'll usually have the nap and then watch it. For the big Vegas fights, for the ones that I really, really want to watch, I will have a nap and then wake up and then watch the fight. Because this one was on Premier Sports, I believe. I don't have Premier Sports or Box Nation. I just slept and then just watched it first thing in the morning. Just find it. Don't touch the phone. Don't look at anything. Just watch it. Find a link somewhere, and somebody will usually send me one, and then watch it first thing in the morning. Safe to say that Errol Spence is absolutely fine.
Yeah, so I think what happened to him was verging on a miracle. I remember watching the video footage where his Ferrari sort of flipped, he goes flying out. Wearing a seatbelt would have actually have killed him on this particular occasion.
Yeah.
But he does what many stuntmen do, about 1/5 of the speed in Hollywood, and he came out with just scratches, no broken bones. So I would say that mentally that would have taken him a little while to get over, but I would say that in terms of a parallel thing that would have taken a lot longer to get over mentally would have been if he'd have been knocked out 3 times on the bounce by a top-ranked 50 fighter. That would have been far more sort of detrimental to his sort of mental integrity. But he came in, he looked in good shape. Garcia, we've got to remember, it's a damn good fighter. He's only lost 2 fights, against world champions, and he's tough as hell. And the thing is as well about Garcia, people don't realise the boxing brain he's got. He's standing in the pocket. If you look at the fight, their front feet, southpaw of Spence and Garcia's orthodox son, their front feet weren't more than about 2 inches apart at any one time. They were literally as close as could be without being uncomfortable. And one would show a shot, the other one would counter. It was literally all the way through. The thing that made Errol Spence win the fight was his volume. He kept far more active throughout the fight. But if the number of shots had been mirrored from Garcia, it would have been a close fight to try and call. But it was just that Garcia didn't throw as much. He didn't counter as much, and Spence sort of kept on him. But it was a very secure, safe performance from Spence. He rocked Danny with a few. Danny, in the last round, the last sort of 30 seconds, unloaded on Spence and gave him a little wobble, but it wasn't a complete knockdown, sort of shake-up type wobble. It was a little hello, here we are, and that was it. But I thought Spence did extremely well. It was a great test to come through. I think it was the perfect fight to come back to as well, because if he'd have gone in with a tomato can, as they say, then that would have done nothing for him. That would have showed that he can beat shit opposition. But by going in there with Danny Garcia, and Danny brought his A game with him, it shows that not only had he, there was no mental ramifications from the car crash, but it also goes to show that he was able to rack up another win during the pandemic, after the car crash, after all the naysayers giving all the media bullshit, and he proved himself yet again. So, listen, the fight we want now has got to be Crawford against Spence. I know that you have Canelo as number one in pound for pound. I got Crawford in my number one pound to pound, and I just think that the fight between Crawford and Spence needs to happen sooner rather than late. We don't want a Pacquiao Mayweather type situation. They're fighting each other in 5 years' time, where to sort of leave the walking frames to one side and sort of get it on in there. I want to see them now while they're prime. And Spence is the older man, but he's Christ. I mean, all you got to do is look at the way he performed against Kell Brook. He looked very good indeed. So let's get those two in the ring. That'll be our treat for 2021.
Good sign last night that Terence Crawford was in the building and was watching it. Perhaps not ringside, but he was pretty close to the ring. That's a good sign. That it shows that I always like that when fighters do that. I like it when a fighter when he wants to fight and he shows he wants to fight. I'm going to rock up, I'm going to turn up at your fight, and you're going to know that I'm there. I like that. I always wanted to see Guillermo Rigondeaux do that. I always wanted to see him, get a flight to Belfast and plonk himself ringside for a Carl Frampton fight and say, come on, I want the fucking fight. I think you don't have to be a prick about it. You haven't got to, throw a chair or anything like David Haye did back in the day, or start glassing somebody. Just be there, get captured on the camera, and make people talk about you. And I was quite pleased that Crawford did that. He didn't sit at home tweeting. He plonked himself, at the side of the ring and showed that he wanted to fight. I think it's a cracking fight between those two. I'm not sure who would win it really. I'd probably just lean towards Crawford at this point. But I thought Spence, he was exceptional last night. The one thing that he does that I really, really like, and he did it in the Kell Brook fight, which I was lucky enough to be ringside at, he invests in bodywork. He invests in the bodywork from round one, and he cashes it out towards the end of the fight, and he usually gets the stoppage. He didn't get the stoppage last night because Danny Garcia is a tough motherfucker, and he's a really good fighter. And that's kind of the first time really that Danny Garcia has been dominated enough that he's lost comfortably. That's probably the first time really that he's kind of lost comfortably, really. You look at the Sean Porter fight, I thought that was a really close fight. You got the Keith Thurman fight, really close fight. Keith Thurman just kept himself in front. He was thereabouts in that fight. And he has boxed a lot of good people. Obviously, the Mauricio Herrera fight, he arguably lost that fight that night. But he's boxed a lot of good people. Khan, Kendall Holt, Nate Campbell, Zab Judah, Matisse, Peterson. Loads of good fighters, and no one has ever really dominated him like he was dominated at times last night by Errol Spence Jr. So I think that says a lot for Errol Spence, that shows the level he's at, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, Spence, I mean, he's one of the things that's almost quite deceiving about him is that he doesn't bounce around like Sugar Ray Leonard in there. He's got good footwork, but he's not one to literally skip and dance and sort of do a ballerina type sort of act. What's deceiving about him is that he's constantly doing something, and he's very, very unforgiving. Whether you've got your hands down or you've taken a shot, he's on it straight away. So there is never a moment where he's sort of standing there with his hands down thinking, what shall I do next? He's always working on something. And I think that's where it will work well with Terence Crawford in terms of the two locking horns, because they're both big thinkers and they compute a lot of information during the fight, and they adjust their game plans as well. So, when Sean Porter was in against Spence, that was a tough fight for Spence, because Porter's volume and his work rate is probably equally as high as Spence. And so it was one of those things, it's like, shit, whose output's going to be the greater here, And so that's, I think, one way certainly you sort of overcome Spence is by saying, I've got to have the volume. But it's not just the volume, then it's like a case of how do you land it? And when you're trying to land against Spence Jr., that ain't just a case of, just walk in and I'll take a shot and he's there. He's not there to find. He's very rarely there to find. And a lot of the shots he took last night, he was. Some of them looked like they were flush, but if you look at them on slow-mo, when the punch landed on his chin from a straight right from Garcia, he'd already leaned back about a good half to 3/4 of a foot. So Very, very intelligent fight. Real pleasure to watch him fight in all his fights, to be honest. Watching him fight. So yeah, Crawford, Spence Jr. Like you say, great to see Crawford in the crowd. I think the only reason he probably didn't come in the ring afterwards because of the whole COVID restrictions. Yeah. But yeah, I think other circumstances he may well have been there, and they'd have asked him to say a few words. But let's hope that's the one which we get treated to next year.
Yeah, hopefully that would be it next year. And what I'd like to see next year as well is Danny Garcia against Keith Thurman in a rematch as well. I think they've both got nowhere to go in a way, but they're both still pretty good operators. We don't know what Thurman's got left. We don't know how much Thurman still wants it, really. I think he's not shown me the last few years. Well, he had 2 years off, didn't he? Close to 2 years off. I'd like to see him. I'd like to see Garcia and Thurman next, really. And if Spence can't get the Crawford fight, then maybe he gets the Pacquiao fight, because he's got a world title as well. So it's still a really good division, welterweight. It's been consistently a really good division for a good 15, well, probably longer than that, but it's been a good division. It's one of the classic divisions, isn't it? It's produced loads of good fights over the years.
When Errol Spence fought against Kell Brook, I remember I was on, I think, TalkSport with Gareth Davison. Gareth Davis basically said that that's Gareth A. Davis, by the way.
Of course, yep.
He was sort of saying, I think the occasion and Spence coming up to Sheffield and whatever else is going to be far too much for him. And I said, I'm going to go for stoppage by Spence, and it kind of, I'm sort of saying, it went the way I predicted. It's just that the some of the power punches Spence lands, they're not just the accuracy, but he will pinpoint exactly the same punch again and again and again because he's very aware of cumulative effects. And almost again, kind of like using this sort of the similarity there. When he caught Brook, it wasn't the first time he landed that punch on the eye, which ended up with the socket injury. In a similar parallel to Joe Joyce with Dubois last week, it was that pinpoint accuracy of knowing that's the hurt zone now, and I've got to keep going for there. So the strategy became to just sort of center it in one part of the face, and that was that. So, but yeah, I mean, listen, I think the way that Errol Spence moves forward from here is maybe having one other fight against another world class name, but I think it's got to be Crawford next.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they can push everything out the way and let's get it going now. Terence Crawford is 33 years old. He needs to stop waiting around now, really. Spencer's got a little bit more time, but he's still 30 himself, so he's got to get a wiggle on as well, even though they've both got pretty decent records. It's time for the pair of them to start adding to the legacy now, especially Crawford. He's 33. He's got to start thinking about legacy now. But a good fight last night. I enjoyed that. I did enjoy it a lot. I actually quite enjoyed having Dan Goosen on comms.
It can be a bit outspoken.
Yeah, he was good, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's the thing as well. Now, we seem to be treated to a lot more of the American fights with the American commentary, which is great. Yeah. So you often get to hear the likes of Andre Ward and Lennox Lewis, two phenomenal world champions and two great pundits with great boxing brains. And I'm not having a go at sort of saying that I don't want to listen to Carl Froch or Matthew Macklin or whatever else. I'm just saying it's refreshing to hear of some of these other guys across the pond, people that we watched growing up over the last sort of few years, to be treated to them, and now to listen to their insight into how they see the fight going and what they would have done as well. You always love that. You can't beat that when the likes of Lennox Lewis or Andre Ward's watching a fight and they say what I would have done, and you're like, yeah, man, I could see how that was going to happen as well, So, but Dan Goosen's got a great perspective, very good trainer. He's had a lot of great fights in the ring with him, and I enjoy that. We need more of the international fights now with DAZN available at £1.99 for the month, is it?
I signed up last night. I did that last night. Signed up last night, £1.99, ready for Canelo.
What do you get for £2 these days? You get a pack of pita breads or something, and that's about it. It's like you wouldn't even you barely get a third of a pint these days for £1.99. So listen, it may very well go up. It could be a one-time deal, whatever. But for the moment, carpe diem, snap it up, rip DAZN's arm off. If you sign up today, then you're going to get Ryan Garcia against
Luke Campbell.
Boot camp, crikey, yeah, was that second of January, and you're also going to get Callum Smith against Canelo. It's worth it just for those two. It really is. So yeah, we got treats at the moment. 3 fight nights on the bounce. The DAZN treat box. It's like an advent calendar full of pugilistic gifts, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely, indeed. I'll tell you what, who I like as well, Andy Lee. He's a good pundit.
Lovely guy. Yeah. Yeah,
he was good, and he gave an impassioned defense of Daniel Dubois last night, I think it was, on Saturday night, and he said in UFC people tap out all the time and they don't get called cowards and told they should never box, they should never fight again. Why did we do that to boxers? We really, really need to change this culture. And I thought it was really, really good. I think Andy Lee's really good, and he doesn't get used enough on the big channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just sort of expanding upon that point of the the term quitting in boxing. So. Carl Frampton mentioned straight after he was there on live commentary saying, he says, Dubois quit. He says that's a decision he will regret for the rest of his life. And I'm thinking, you know what? So we don't know the extent of the damage of the eye first. Yeah, I started thinking about Anthony Ogogo and whatever else. But when he said that's a comment he'll regret for the rest of his life, well, I wrote the book of Paul Ingle. I interviewed, his mother for hundreds of hours. I interviewed the brain surgeon. I interviewed all of Paul Ingle's mates, having to see a lot of them, and his mum in tears while they recounted, the better times and then the actual night of when Paul Ingle was taken to hospital and declared dead on 3 occasions from that one punch. That's a decision you regret for the rest of your life, and for many people that would be the rest of their life that night. Because when you get a blood clot to the brain, it's usually from one punch that snaps a vein and then bang, you get the blood clot. So not being able to see out of one eye, reduced vision of 50% is one thing. When you've got a couple of fractures in the eye where one of the fractures then cause permanent blindness, taking a knee so you can fight another day, yeah, well done, Dubois. That's what I say. I say absolutely well done. You want to show you're tough? That's one thing. How many fighters are constantly going, boxing is a business? Why are we not seeing all these Chris Eubank Jr. hasn't fought in a year and a half, whatever it may be. He's no fool. He fights for the money. If someone was to say to him, well, the best we can do for your next few fights is £5,000, he would say, well, you know what, I'll retire. That's fine. He fights for the money. The fighters fight for money. It's a business. So Dubois made a very prudent business decision. Take the knee, come back, fight another day, get it repaired. And that's it, and hopefully the eye can fully repair and there's no long-term damage, and he can come back to his destructive ways and repair forward. The likes of David Haye, absolutely annihilated by Carl Thompson. That's the other thing as well. Does Dubois need to fight Joyce again? Not really. No. A lot of fighters who lost fights early in their career didn't fight that loss again and move forward and work through the gears and beat much better fighters. So you learn from the lesson, and that's it. The eye socket damage that he had there, it's no joke. So I think he did the right thing. And like Andy Lee said, fighters in UFC tap out. It's either that or you break an arm, you suffer like a neck injury, a spinal injury, and then you never fight again. So you're making that decision to say, I fight another day, and that's it. And there's no harm in that whatsoever.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. We're nearly done, but let's just quickly predictions for next week. Anthony Joshua against Kubrat Pulev for the WBA, IBF, and WBO heavyweight titles. 2 questions. Number 1, are you looking forward to it? And number 2, what's your prediction?
I'm looking forward to it. Not really, no. It's not a fight that I'm like, yeah, Joshua Pulev, it's like the rumble in the jungle. Not really, no. When it's on, I'll watch it. If I was to suddenly realise I've missed it because I was watching a rerun of Schwarzenegger in Commando, then so be it. I'd be like, I'd watch it in the morning. So Enzo Maccarinelli probably backed me up on that. It's a great movie. But in terms of how I see it going, Pulev's tough fighter, tough hombre. Kind of cut out that sort of not as similar cloth. As what was it? Dillian White fought against recently. Povetkin. Povetkin, very, very rough and tough. Gold medalist, etc. Not as good as that, but that's certainly that sort of same sort of physique and those deadly sort of hooks that can be thrown. But I think that I think Josh will dispose of him in under 6 rounds. Again, it depends what version of Joshua we're going to see, because the last time he fought was against Ruiz in the rematch, and he went for the jab and grab style approach, where he turned into Vladimir Klitschko. So whether he's going to stay behind that because he's fighting a similar, maybe shaped type fighter to Ruiz, but I don't think it's going to be a classic. Last famous words, it could turn out to be Rumble in the Jungle, but I don't think it's going to be a classic. I think Joshua will dominate. If he lets the hammer go and knocks him out, great, and that's it. It's not what I'm looking forward to be honest. It really isn't. There's a lot of bullshit fights going on at heavyweight. There's some great fights to be had. Fury against Joshua, certainly out there. Deontay Wilder. Why isn't Deontay Wilder calling out Anthony Joshua? It's just not happening. Those two, there'll be a lot of explosions going on there. Two fighters who I think could be a fantastic matchup there. But again, who knows what's going on with Wilder? How much mentally has been taken out of him, and has he managed to regain his fitness from the 45-pound armor he was wearing? So yeah. Who knows? I think again this year we were treated to one of the best heavyweight fights in a long time with Fury and Wilder, and after that the best fight was Joyce against Dubois. But Pulev Joshua for me does nothing. But like I said, under 6 rounds, Joshua.
I agree. Doesn't do much for me. Not even sure I'll get the pay-per-view. I agree. I think he'll stop Pulev in 7-8 rounds. Wilder needs to get out there and get a fight anybody. Doesn't have to be Fury. Fight somebody. Get a fight. Fight Andy Ruiz. He'd smash Andy Ruiz. He'd smash most people, Deontay Wilder. He's no can. And this is the thing that annoys me. Just because, Wilder's lost a fight doesn't make him a bum. It means Tyson Fury's a fucking good fighter. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that Wilder's suddenly shit. That's not how it works. You can't say Fury's the best in the world and then say Wilder's shit. That doesn't make any sense. Wilder's a fucking good fighter, and he'll knock out plenty of people at heavyweight. Maybe not Joshua or Fury. I still think he might knock out Joshua. He wouldn't beat Fury, but he'd knock out most. But we'll wrap it up.
Maybe Joe Joyce against Deontay Wilder. If Juggernaut can run him over,
Yeah, that I think Joyce would fight anybody. He's 35. He's not waiting around. He's not old for a heavy. That's not old for a heavy.
What, 34?
Wilder, it's about right. Yeah, he's about 34. Yeah, so they're both at a good age. They're a good age for a heavyweight. I think you're right. I think that'd be a cracking fight. I'd like to see that. I think Joyce has got a good chin, and he might just stand up to Wilder's power. He doesn't have the physicality that Fury does. I think that's sometimes understated that Fury is 6'9". He's 6'9" to 19 stone and moves like a super middleweight. Though he's gifted. That's gifted, and I think that's kind of under. I think people don't think about that sometimes, that he has these innate physical advantages over every other fighter in the sport. But yeah, it's good to have Joshua back. It gets people talking about boxing. It gets people. It's usually fun. I think he'll knock him out. I think he'll look good doing it. And we'll wait and see. There's nothing on the undercard. Let's not bother. That'll do, Paul.
Lovely. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I always love it, mate.
All right. Yeah, and we haven't forgotten you and Sean Boxing Ryder Cup. It's happening. We'll do it very, very soon.
All
right. Let's go. All right. Thanks, bud. Take care.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.